You've probably heard the term Six Sigma thrown around in a meeting or a business article and kinda nodded along, right? Well, today we're gonna demystify it. We're breaking down this really powerful method that's all about the quest for near perfection. Let's jump in.
So, Six Sigma tries to answer a massive question. How do you make something, well, nearly perfect? And we're not talking about just making small improvements here and there. We are talking about refining a process so much that mistakes become almost statistically impossible.
So, what does nearly perfect actually look like in numbers? Get this, it means having only 3.4 defects for every million opportunities. Imagine making 1,000,000 products and only 3 or 4 have the slightest flaw. That's the Six Sigma standard. The bar is set unbelievably high.
Okay, so where in the world did this game-changing idea come from? Let's go back to the beginning.
Now, the key phrase here is data-driven. Six Sigma is not about guesswork or hunches. It's a highly disciplined method that's all about using hard data to prevent defects from ever happening in the first place instead of just catching them at the end.
The whole story kicks off in the mid-80s at Motorola. An engineer named Bill Smith developed it basically out of necessity. They were getting crushed by Japanese competitors who were setting a whole new standard for quality. But it was the legendary GE CEO, Jack Welch, who really put Six Sigma on the map, turning it into the engine that drove his entire business.
So, now that we know where it came from, let's look under the hood at how it actually works. And the engine that powers this entire methodology is a 5-phase cycle known as demake.
You can think of demake as kind of like the scientific method, but for business problems. It gives you a clear, structured roadmap to solve those really tough problems where the answer isn't obvious. It forces you to rely on data, not just gut feelings.
This here gives us a great bird's eye view of the whole process. You can see the 5 stages right there: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Think of it like you're a detective, solving a complex case. Each step logically builds on the last one. Let's dive into each piece.
First up is define. This is your foundation. Before you do anything else, you have to clearly spell out what the problem is, who the customer is, and what they actually care about. So let's say a local coffee shop wants to fix its crazy long wait times. They would define the problem, identify their customer as the morning commuter in a hurry, and set a clear goal, like getting every order out in under 3 minutes. This makes sure the whole team is aiming for the same target.
Next, you move into the measure phase. This is where you stop guessing and start getting the facts. You map out exactly how things are working right now and collect data to create a baseline. So, our coffee shop team would start timing every single step, from taking the order to making the drink to processing the payment. After a week, they'd have hard data showing the average wait is actually 7 minutes. This is where the true scale of the problem becomes crystal clear.
Now that you have all that data, it's time to analyze. The goal here is to dig past the surface-level symptoms and find the real root cause of the problem. You're putting on your detective hat. Our coffee shop might analyze their data and discover the bottleneck isn't slow baristas. It's actually a clunky old payment system that keeps crashing. You're using data to pinpoint the true source of the pain.
Okay, once you know the cause, it's time to improve. This is where you brainstorm and test out solutions. But here's the key. You don't just roll out a massive, company-wide change all at once. The coffee shop might pilot a new tap-to-pay system at just 1 register for a week. You test your ideas on a small scale first to prove they actually work before you go all in.
And finally, there's the control phase. This is how you make the fix permanent. If that new payment system was a home run, the coffee shop now rolls it out to all the registers, trains every employee on it, and sets up a plan to monitor weekly wait times to make sure they stay low. This is how you lock in your improvements so you don't just slide back into the old bad habits a few months later.
And remember, this is not a one-and-done deal. It's a cycle. Once you've got that new process under control, you can start all over again, maybe looking at a different bottleneck in the system. You're always pushing for better results.
So all of this sounds great in theory, right? But what does it actually look like in the real world?
Let's start with the most famous success story. At General Electric, Jack Welch went all in on Six Sigma. And the payoff was, well, it was enormous. The company reported saving over $12 billion in just the first 5 years. A number like that is what made the entire business world sit up and take notice.
But it's really not just for factories making widgets. The core ideas of Six Sigma can be applied almost anywhere. In hospitals, it's been used to slash patient wait times. In banks, it has dramatically sped up loan approvals. That data-driven approach just works, no matter the industry.
Of course, it's not a magic bullet. To get the whole story, we have to look at the challenges too, because it doesn't always go smoothly.
And that brings up a really important question. If Six Sigma is so effective, why doesn't it work for every company that tries it? Well, the answer usually isn't a problem with the method itself, but in how it's actually implemented.
You know, the biggest roadblocks are often about people. Without strong, sustained commitment from leadership, these initiatives just lose steam and fizzle out. If employees resist the changes, or if management only sees it as a short-term trick to cut costs, it's pretty much doomed to fail. It really requires a true cultural shift, which is one of the hardest things for any organization to pull off.
And this slide shows the two different mindsets perfectly. The companies that succeed see Six Sigma as a core part of their philosophy. It's built into how they operate. The ones that fail often treat it like a temporary tool to bolt on for a single project, usually just to cut costs, and then they move on.
So here's the bottom line. Six Sigma is so much more than just a set of tools and charts. Its real power is in fundamentally changing how a company thinks. It's about building a culture that is obsessed with using data to solve problems and to never, ever stop trying to get better for the customer.
And that leaves us with a final question for you to think about. In a world that is completely obsessed with agile and moving fast, where does a meticulous, careful method like Six Sigma fit in? When is good enough not actually good enough? That's something worth chewing on.